On Fanalysis, we take the stats born in fantasy football combined with the latest betting trends to find the sharpest angles every week. Jared Smith is on assignment. We brought in the big guns, VSiN's Tim Murray, the co-host of VSiN Primetime Weeknight 6 to 9 Eastern, and the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. Tim, let's start things off with the Jets and the Giants game. Starting off with the Jets. 3-point dogs in Minnesota, but the road is where the Jets play their best because defense travels. Which way are you leaning here? Not trying to influence you here.
Yeah, I like to be as transparent as possible. You know, I don't want to be the guy who says, "Oh, I've got a bet on every game," because that's not how you make a lot of money. So I don't have a bet on this particular game, but I do want to dive into it because I find it fascinating. You know, Minnesota has been a team that's, you know, been kind of living on the edge this year, right? They've got a great record sitting there at 9-2. Haven't maybe been all that well respected in the eyes of bettors, and I think there's some reason behind that. You know, you played Dallas a couple weeks ago, you lose 40-3. I honestly, though, think that last weekend or last Thursday, Thanksgiving night, might have been the best performance we saw all year, maybe outside of the Buffalo game where they went on the road and won that wild game. You know, Kirk Cousins is a guy that seems to be thriving in the Kevin O'Connell offense here, and that has maybe changed his demeanor. We've seen how he's been celebrated by his teammates after wins. You know, the chains on the team flight after the win against his former team Washington. But I imagine that Robert Saleh is going to dial up some pressure, and the reason the Cowboys thrive so well, they just threw everything at Kirk Cousins pressure-wise, and that would be my expectation here on Sunday in Minnesota, is that Robert Saleh, obviously a defensive-minded coach, as all your listeners know and viewers know, I think you're going to see a lot of pressure, and when you've got big-time corners like Ahmad Sauce Gardner out there, they're going to be willing to put them on an island and, you know, maybe go head-to-head with Justin Jefferson and see if they can win that one-to-one battle so you can bring that pressure. So that would be my expectation. And then you look at Mike White. I mean, obviously you guys, I'm sure, have talked about it plenty about the decision to go to Mike White. And yes, it was the Chicago Bears defense that has been depleted due to trades and, you know, just really lack of talent. But Mike White looked the part last week, and I think you could see I don't know if exactly the same success, but similar success this weekend because the playmakers are there for this Jets team on offense.
A couple of notes to kind of back up exactly what you're saying. The Jets' pressure rate, I should say, the Jets' blitz rate is the third lowest in the NFL, but their pressure rate is the fifth highest, which means they're getting pressure without sending anybody. That means that they don't have to put guys on islands. And when you have a matchup between an elite corner and an elite receiver, it usually tends to lean more towards the cornerback because so many things have to go right for that receiver to even get the ball. I tend to think that the Jets' defense is going to be able to slow this, you know, Minnesota's offense down a little bit more. And then at the on the flip side of that, man, can you believe that Mike White has 4 starts for the Jets and the average points per game with him as the starter is 28? He just seems to get this LaFleur offense.
He really does. And, you know, Garrett Wilson is a guy that, you know, coming out last year out of Ohio State was just a phenomenal talent. And you saw it on display against Chicago last week. You know, 8 targets, I should say, 5 catches, 2 touchdowns. And, you know, I expect, you know, him to continue to flourish here. So there's a lot of exciting pieces on this offense. And if you've got a quarterback who can facilitate, like we've seen so far, granted, as you mentioned, in a very limited sample size, I think, you know, the Jets, there's a reason that they're only a 3-point underdog here on the road at Minnesota. This is a Minnesota team sitting at 9-2. You know, most people believe that home field advantage is baked in at around 3. That's kind of been debunked a little bit over the years, maybe more around the 2 mark, but Minnesota has a good home field advantage. But, you know, think about it this way. If the Jets were playing this game at MetLife Stadium, they're a favorite. Yeah. So it kind of goes to tell you, you know, what odds makers think about Minnesota and also what odds makers are thinking about this Jets team. So it's a pretty low total, 44.5, spread of 3. I'll just say this. Jets are absolutely live, you know, in this spot on Sunday afternoon.
Well, they're a better team on the road than they actually are at home this year as well. The Giants are home dogs this week by 2.5 points against Washington. Taylor Heineke is rolling. I mean, the Giants have really kind of come back down to earth a little bit here. So what catches your eye in this matchup is these two teams seem to be passing, going in opposite directions.
Yeah, I think some people might be surprised that Washington is a road favorite here against the New York Giants. And I've talked to some odds makers, and, over the past couple weeks, they've continued to upgrade this Washington team. Maybe not necessarily because of Taylor Heineke, but you've seen this team lean on the run game. Brian Robinson coming back from, the gunshot injury, and he had his best game as a pro last week against the Atlanta Falcons. They're figuring out ways in this offense to utilize the pieces that they have. There was a lot of high expectations with, Terry McLaurin and, a lot of other, fascinating pieces there in Washington. But the defensive line is where they make their hay. I mean, they are stout up front, and that's even without Chase Young being fully healthy. Jonathan Allen is the real deal. But I want to pass across an interesting nugget. I'm not a big, better in the prop market, but, I know a lot of people that thrive and love betting the prop market, especially, if you focus mostly on fantasy football for the past couple of years. Now this is a new way to kind of make some money. And DraftKings, as of, Friday, had Daniel Jones's over-under for rush yards at 32.5 yards. And someone who, keeps a close eye on this type of thing, pointed out that the Washington defense has actually struggled a bit against quarterbacks, and the success rate against quarterbacks is only 38.5% for this Washington defense. And Marcus Mariota was able to get some good runs last week, and Daniel Jones, behind Josh Allen, is a guy that gets a lot of design runs. So yeah, I'd be very curious to see what Brian Daboll dials up for Daniel Jones this week, utilizing his legs against this Washington defense. And maybe that's an avenue where the Giants can see some success with Daniel Jones using his legs. And, I think over 32.5 rushing yards could be a way to look for Sunday's game at MetLife.
You know what? Pair that with a parlay on the under as well, because the Giants have gone under in 16 of the last 18 home games. And it seems like this is another one of those spots where the under is definitely in play. That's how he sees the Jets and the Giants games. Make sure you check out our other segment on Week 11's, or Week 13 rather's, Best Bets. For Tim Murray of VSiN, I'm Steve Overmyer. This is Fanalysis.